term spectrum keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But what bothers me the most is that I guess it's trending to be autistic, and I'm very worried about this.
When are we going to talk about how people of color either go their whole lives not diagnosed, or they get diagnosed way later in life and their spectrum looks completely different from the stereotype that is shaped after white individuals? People who claim to be so pure, so socially and politically correct are the same people that are going to attack you in such a crazy way. It's one and the same, honestly. It's like purity culture in religion repackaged.
Haters are ugly and the haters were extremely overweight.
That's quite an insult.
I wonder if the mom's processing that these conversations are all things that she is actively fighting against when she is supporting the need for stereotypes. That doesn't make sense. If you disagree with them and you don't listen to them, then how do you know what you're disagreeing with? But my prediction is that the accommodations we need to be integrated more successfully in society and to be able to thrive better are the same accommodations that neurotypical people would actually need and benefit from.
Oh, leave the nice lady alone. And I was like, no, please let him stay with me. This is so cool. So that's because I'm coming from that place of looking at neurodiversity, autism, Asperger's in a different way, because I've been around it for 25 years.
I'm a teacher's aide for the beginning theater class at my school, and there are quite a few kids in the class with autism. Sometimes they'll say something that's a little crazy or a little out there, sometimes like some other kid might take offense to it, but I just know like sometimes there's no filter, like it's okay, and I'm just like, okay, like let's talk about why that might not work, why that might not be a thing to say, or if it's something that's like, whatever, we can just move past it. So yeah, definitely like no judgment at all. Like I understand that sometimes there's like less of a filter or something else like that.
So both of my parents are special education preschool teachers. They've bounced around throughout the grade levels. But when I was in preschool, I went to the same campus that they did, and I was in a class where myself and then later my sister were the only two neurotypical kids. Mm-hmm. Everyone else there either had autism, Asperger's, or some sort of physical disability. Mm-hmm. It's not something where I would look down on a person for having that just because I've been around it so long. But I know that, like we were talking about, public high schools and kids in general can be really cruel. And it's not uncommon to see autism or the R word being thrown around as an insult.
And it happens on social media all the time, especially TikTok.
Unfortunately.
TikTok is like a war ground, a battleground for like the rudest, meanest, most judgmental people. And sadly, a percentage of them say they are on the spectrum.
Prior to my son being diagnosed, I remember one of the things that worried me was that as a parent, when you first have a baby, autism is almost treated like something you have to avoid. Like it's almost like, be careful, don't feed him this, don't do this, don't tell him that. And then when he had autism, I was like, okay, now what? And they're all like,
that's the thing. People who claim to be so pure, so socially and politically correct are the same people that are going to attack you in such a crazy way that is just completely counterintuitive to what it would mean to hold someone accountable. When you're just attacking someone and critiquing them in everything they do and projecting your own issues onto them, it detracts from what needs to be addressed, and it takes away the safe space for learning to take place and for change to take place, because you're not a source that someone could trust anymore at that point. They can't listen to you and be like, yeah, you make a good point, I need to do better, let me try to integrate this change the best that I can. You can make one valid point, like, don't do this, that's messed up, and then because you're so angry or maybe even triggered, you're like now interpreting every single thing about this person as a flaw, and you're just like, and you do this and it's because you're a crappy person, and you do that and you're careless, and you do this because you don't care, you're a horrible person. And then all of a sudden at some point the person that's supposed to take in your critiques is like, no, I'm not listening to you anymore, because I am a good person, I do try my hardest, maybe I said something or did something that isn't okay, whether I meant to or not, but like, this conversation's over. Like, I have a boundary and I'm setting it right now. And any healthy person's gonna have a boundary. Just because you have a boundary doesn't mean you're ignorant and you don't want to learn. It's just, depending on how you're spewing that critique at another person, if they respect themselves and care about themselves, they will put a boundary at some point if you're not being reasonable. In many ways, I do resonate with a lot of liberal thoughts, and I would consider myself a liberal. But at the same time, what I've been really noticing the past year is that people on the far left, people who are like social justice warriors or think so highly of themselves and their values, are such bullies. They are just as delusional as like very closed-minded people on like the far right. It's one and the same, honestly. It's like purity culture in religion repackaged. Purity culture on the right side is like, be a virgin, be the perfect woman, perfect wife, perfect man. This is what a woman does. This is what a man does. And then on the far left, it's just like, you can't do this. You can't do that. If you do this, then that means you're a bad person. It's literally the same thing, you know? So like, where are my middle people at? Where are my gray people at? Of like, we have to have actual nuance in our interactions and interpretations and conversations. You know what I'm saying? I was already saying this before. The mom admitted to TikTok being just filled with like crazy people, but hearing her confirm that, she's probably been ridiculed so much. And I've seen it myself. I've seen so many people on TikTok just like tearing her apart. And whenever I see that, I'm like skeptical. I'm just like, is this person really just the devil incarnated? Or is she just someone that triggers people and they want to take control of her and the situation and tear her down? But the thing is, those people tearing her down probably think so highly of themselves and so justified. And they are not people who could like look at themselves and be like, ooh, I'm being a little bit aggressive and this isn't good either. Like, I have to reevaluate myself and my actions. They're probably the types that think like, I need to do it this way because if I don't, that means I'm a bad person or whatever.
And I'm like, but what does it mean? Nobody could tell me what it meant. Nobody told me what it looked like. I mean, he smiles, he hugs me. They're like, some people hug. Is he gonna talk? Maybe. I'm like, you're not gonna tell me anything. What am I gonna find out about him? So I was preconditioned to be fearful of this thing that once I saw how it affected our lives personally, it wasn't bad, you know? It was one of those things where like, I was expecting the worst possible situation. I think a lot of times people have opinions on something that they don't know anything about.
What I actually just realized is one of the key defining moments was actually like remembering, I was having a hard time socializing in middle school. I remember one commercial
Yeah, me too.
from Autism Speaks. It was like, the Black Plague was among us, and just talking about an autism. It's like autism was basically treated like this curse, and you know, it's gonna creep on you when you're least expecting it and everything. Like, and I remember that commercial vividly, and it's just like, what kind of message are you sending out to the whole world who won't take the time to educate themselves on things? And
I'm so happy that Autism Speaks has really stepped up their game in recent years since then.
Accommodations should be made for autistic people
This should be
to
100%.
included in society.
This needs to be 100. I would be surprised if someone disagreed.
Something that I've written about quite a bit, and why I felt like I've had to write about my autistic experiences a lot as an adult, is because there are no services really for adults.
Why is that guy standing in the back?
A problem.
I'd be
At
so
least,
curious
like,
to see what
besides,
he
like,
has to
speech
say.
therapies and stuff like
'Cause
that.
I don't-
mean, in terms of like, for me, learning how to be social, it was something I had to learn on my own. And like, I know that other autistic people, unfortunately, will struggle with substance abuse and alcoholism and stuff like that, because, you know, putting on the mask can be so exhausting. You just kind of like don't know what else to do. Taking THC for me has helped really kind of help me learn how to
Boy,
about
I
my
understand
autism,
that.
actually, which sounds like such a stoner thing. I don't consider myself a stoner, but just,
I'm a stoner.
you know, I don't think those are concrete things. Like, you know,
I'm a
and
stoner.
I do think that the medical industry, in part by updating their understanding and updating terminology, I do think that there needs to be more.
What are some specific accommodations you would like to see?
I don't know if I can think of specific accommodations, but I think just like this overall misunderstanding of autism, really, as cliche as it is, I mean, it really just affects every single autistic person.
Well, the problem is that autism manifests itself in so many unique ways,
Right.
and it can differ so much from person to person that, you know, the moment that you're out of the public school system, right, they stop providing an aid, right? And
Exactly.
yeah, navigating life yourself like that is probably really difficult.
It's difficult for a typical person coming out of high school in this day and age with the pressures and social media in your face.
And
I see it with
inflation.
her brother. It is so hard, I think, for a lot of people, let alone someone. And then the parents of the person who just turned 18 trying to help their kid build a life.
Yeah, with no support.
No support, it takes a lot of fight. I'm a fighter, so I speak from that. I've been there, done that. I have cried more hours on the phone trying to get accommodations and programs going for
Woo! Chills in my body, you guys. She just confirmed everything that I was saying throughout this video when it comes to her being a parent of Abby and what it takes to be a caretaker. She is protective. She has spent hours on the phone crying, trying to get her daughter accommodations. This is why she is the way she is, and she's had to become that way. Not because she's controlling, not because she cares only about what she wants. It's for her daughter. It's for her daughter. As someone who has autism, that's a part of this community in some sort of capacity, or at least has a platform, I feel like it's important to gently hold other autistic people accountable, specifically the autistic people who are just like so quick to ridicule people and critique everything about them and project their own issues onto them, to truly reflect on how much of your critiques are just your unresolved traumas and how you were failed, and now you're projecting that on another person and becoming blind to what is actually there. You know what I'm saying? That is not okay. It's just not. Honestly, even without morals or subjectivity and emotions involved, it's just not productive. This is where my Aquarius Mercury comes in. You know what I'm saying? Maybe she did one thing or a few things that aren't okay. Sure. We all do that. But if you're going to take that and then all of a sudden just like go in on her and call her a bad person, a bad mom, a controlling person, and start attaching all of these interpretations onto her, how many times are people doing that to you and it's not okay? How many times has someone projected their own shit onto you, made it your fault, called you a bad person and inadequate, instead of actually sitting there and listening to you and trying to understand you and seeing things from your perspective? Are you becoming the very thing that you hate most? Every system does not have the appropriate accommodations for autistic individuals, including the places that are supposed to have it, like elementary schools. Elementary schools, I think, are the only places that has somewhat of a support for autistic individuals. Even then, it's not good, let alone colleges, jobs. What's tying all these things together? They're necessary to be in society, and without it, you would not be able to live in society. And those places don't have accommodations. How are people supposed to make a living as an autistic individuals and learn how to be integrated into society if nothing integrates us from birth? I think only 15% of autistic individuals are employed, and those are people who have education. 15%, 1-5. You know how low that is? I don't know if there's research or studies that can confirm this yet. Maybe a few years later it will, and then you guys could reference back to this video where I said it. But my prediction is that the accommodations that autistics need, whether or not you're a high support needs or low support needs, but the accommodations we need to be integrated more successfully in society and to be able to thrive better are the same accommodations that neurotypical people would actually benefit from. Again, this ties back to what the mom says, can versus have to. So there's certain accommodations that would disable us because we need it. But that isn't to say that those same accommodations can't also benefit neurotypical people. And that's what we're going to realize, is being able to take breaks from work to STEM. I think everyone would benefit from that. Not being expected to socialize if you don't want to at work. I think there's a lot of holistic neurotypical people that would actually want that too, you know? And the mom makes a good point. Society is already getting to a place where neurotypical holistic people are struggling to make it through, let alone autistic people. If I were to come up with a metaphor, when your health starts to go down, it will start to show up in some body part of yours. Like your eyes turning red, for example, can be indicative of you not getting enough nutrients or your kidneys failing or whatever. So I feel like when we see a certain population of people really, really struggling, it's not because of them that they're struggling. It's because our society is sick. Our society is the whole body. And it's just certain people are going to get sick and exhibit that sickness first. And we have to address that. And once we address that, we realize that that actually is the best for the whole body in general. And I feel like we're getting to a point where the disabled community has been sick and hasn't been able to function. And the general population is also getting to that point. But I feel like we're going to figure out ways to accommodate the disabled community first before our society knows how to integrate accommodations for everyone. That is just my theory. That is just my theory.
All right, just to be clear, I do not disagree with any of you. But I do disagree with the prompt because obviously people on the spectrum need accommodations. I had an IEP growing up. I feel like I often need accommodations all the time. But I really am hopeful that we can get to a point where we won't need accommodations to be included in society. You know what I mean? Like, for example, Best Buddies, an organization.
I see what he's saying. I see what he's saying.
They say it firsthand. They exist to not exist. They're doing these amazing services for including disabled people, but ultimately the goal is for that to not happen.
I always try to be respectful of everybody else. Like if we are at a loud restaurant and he's yelling at a loud restaurant, everyone's yelling. You can yell at a loud, but if we're at a library, if we're at a recital or something, I take him outside. So because of that, there's things we can't do. But in the last few years, we've been going to, like on Broadway, they'll have autism-friendly presentations. We saw the Rockettes, we saw the Nutcracker, and it was so great to not only be able to do that with him and let him be able to see that and be a part of it, and to not stand out, but on top of it too, people who are affected by autism differently than my son, to see them given like, you know, fidget toys and they squeeze, I'm like, this is such a beautiful thing. And I think sometimes when we talk about accommodations, a lot of people who are neurotypical see it as, okay, what are you gonna do to my thing now to make it easier for somebody else? And what I'm saying is, you don't necessarily have to change what you're doing, but maybe make something that my son can go to as well, where if he's not gonna interfere with what you're doing, that kind of a thing. That's how I saw it when I said that.
I think what he might be trying to get at is I hope our society gets to a point where we don't need accommodations because the core values of our foundation is already changed to a point where we don't need accommodations. So I agree with that because I feel like me and him think the same thing, just we use different words to describe it. Like accommodations is only needed if our society isn't supportive of people and they need accommodations to be able to make it work. So neurodivergency, autism isn't necessarily a disability, but because of how our society is set up, it is a disability because we can't function at the capacity it needs us to. But we're finding out that everyone is unable to function at the capacity that it needs to. So I feel like what has to happen is that society needs to change its fundamental values so that it could integrate disabled people better, but honestly, so that everyone could be integrated better. And it's not because there are accommodations, but because it's just core values that are there and is supportive of everyone.
Just because you were talking about Broadway shows, I know the show How to Dance in Ohio, which is
I
about,
just saw it.
I saw How to Dance in Ohio.
I really want to go see it.
It was great.
But I think, if I remember correctly, I think they do have like a sensory room.
They do. They have a sensory room. They have
everything.
Spinners. They have all kinds of stuff that's accommodated, and the performers are on the spectrum.
Right. And so, like with that, I think we can normalize things like that.
I was on American Idol this past season.
Oh.
I did, and I told them straight up, in order for me to be my most optimal self, and in order for me to be my best self, I'll need some of these accommodations. I'll need you. I understand that, you know, schedules are a bit loose when it comes to, you know, entertainment industry related stuff, but if you can just give me some degree of a little push, you know, as to giving me some sort of ETA for this, that, and the other. And they were great. They were great. I had a wonderful experience on American Idol for that reason. I was the only non-minor there who had his mom with him during that time. And I'm proud to admit that. I'm a mama's boy.
Autistic people are not accurately represented in the media.
Let's go, people.
Ooh, I'm interested to hear what they have to say.
It's okay.
Obviously, I'm a white autistic male, And a lot of like the mainstream representation are quote unquote like super intelligent white autistic males, but that's all there really is. And for me, I'm not like Sean on The Good Doctor. I think we've definitely made
Most of us aren't.
good progress with certain things, but I just remember growing up, it was always like superficial stereotype. And I just would love to see autism represented in a way that's more nuanced, with like particularly with women.
Great team,
Like not
great
all autistic
team.
women are Temple Grandin, and as
Great
brilliant as she
team,
is,
great
as brilliant
team.
as she is, but that's not. That the problem is they want to take these like pillars and just kind of think that like these are the only options. It's either
Yeah.
like the worst of the worst or the best of the
Yeah.
best, and that's not fair. And
No,
that's not
that's
true.
so true.
You know, I want to see an autistic character where their autism isn't necessarily like their whole story.
Mm-hmm.
I have some friends who think that, and I think this is probably kind of prevalent. If you say they have autism, they have savant syndrome, right? Where they're just a genius and they can magically do something perfectly, like play piano. Or they're a person who has really low functioning autism and they can't do much, they need able people to help them. It's unfortunate that that's kind of the two stories that are being pushed. And there's not a lot of nuance there. And people assume the worst or the best, and they don't look at it the other way.
So my thing is, I wish that the term spectrum keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what it doesn't do is honor the individual skill sets.
Right.
Like you have an incredible skill set. You just got your AA. Congratulations. Thank you. And your son sounds amazing and loving and sweet, and you know what that is because you spend all your time with him. And this charm right here, it's amazing. But what bothers me the most is that in the media, like TikTok, for example, I guess it's trending to be autistic,
Oh,
and
it's
I'm very
trendy to
worried
be-
about this. It's trending.
Match it with Thomas.
Well, what I'd like to say is, if you have sensory issues, you're now called autistic. I grew up with a brother who had sensory issues. He is not autistic. Well, now you're clumped in with that. So then what is the representation if there's literally not 3 levels, but 50 levels of functioning?
50 levels of functioning?
Yeah, it's confusing.
Right,
Like
like
on
it-
TikTok, you'll see like someone with 8 million followers on TikTok who's a comedian, who's the funniest person ever, and I'm an amazing fan of, is looking for an autism diagnosis at 35 with a college degree and 2 kids. And you go, oh, I wonder what that is for them, because did you have any speech therapy? What is it, and why do you feel you need that diagnosis? But that media attention is what's permeating the rest of people who are not familiar with autism, thinking, oh, I don't like loud noises. I hate the sun. I must too be autistic, and that's a worry for me.
Okay, that is the first time she said something that I'm like, don't agree with. I'm sensing that she here is projecting her own struggles onto. What she said is kind of like, it doesn't make sense. I could be interpreting this wrong. Let me know, you guys. But what I got from what she said is that she doesn't want the spectrum to diversify. She doesn't want it to expand because she worries that the meaning of autism is going to get lost and that people are going to think that these are just personality traits rather than a pretty intense and serious disability. I have to rewind because I need to see what the mom said to the question of if autism is a disability and see where her stance was there, because I want to see if she's consistent or not.
So you think it's okay to use the word disability because it helps people understand how hard you've worked to be in the
Yes, it
conversation?
does. I'm even in a therapy right now.
That's true. And I would agree with Abby on that. I would say that because this autism word and spectrum now has successful people and writers
Yeah.
who are neurodifferent and people who have had 20 years of speech therapy.
And I'm one of them.
You are, and rock star over here, but it's confusing. So I like the word disability because when we're in public and Abby has a stim or arms are flailing,
Yeah.
Okay, I see where we're getting. I see where the critiques are coming from. It seems like the mom and Abby are defining autism by identifying it to the struggle. identifying it to the disability, which is very valid because that is their reality and that is the reality of a lot of autistic people. But here is where I think their or her viewpoint needs to have a chance to expand. Everyone's disability is going to be disabling to them at different capacities. I feel like there's this idea that she thinks that if someone isn't struggling at a certain level, that must mean that they're not autistic, because then if it does mean they're autistic, the spectrum is beginning to lose its meaning, because if you're autistic, it must mean that you are disabled at this very specific capacity. If you're only shaping accommodations after the 𝗬𝐷𝐵s out there, then what happens to all these other autistic people that need other accommodations because they're disabled in other ways? You know what I'm saying? Some autistic people don't have mothers like her. They don't have a support system like her, and therefore they're going to have other accommodations. If we really want to start measuring disabilities here and like struggles, we start to get into really murky waters, because there may be someone that, objectively speaking, have less needs than 𝗬𝗑, for example. But what if that person is dealing with trauma? What if that person doesn't have parents to help take care of them? They don't have stable financial support system. They don't have friends. Even if they objectively have less support needs, because of their circumstance, they may be more disabled than 𝗬𝗑. You know what I'm saying? That's why we're getting into murky waters here, because we can't measure people's autism and disabilities and start to think like, oh, this must mean they're not autistic. It can't be. We have to have a good idea of what that spectrum looks like. What circumstances do they have outside of their spectrum? And how are they disabled by all of these different factors? So I disagree with the mom here. I think we need to keep finding what the spectrum looks like and painting that picture more and more and more, and then see how society is going to move from there.
Could you see it like in a positive light, in the sense that now people are wanting to identify with it because they've seen the positive traits of autism?
If I didn't have people that attack me on social media for helping 𝗬𝗑 to get her, what do we say? What's our sentence? To get your brain?
To do what I'm telling it to do, of course.
Right, to get her brain to do what she's telling it to do.
Haters.
I know, there's some really mean people, and it's because I'm helping
The
her.
haters are ugly, and the haters are extremely overweight.
That's quite an insult. Yeah. Now, why don't you tell them, why is that? You said that because you're thinking in categories.
Because I think in categories, this is the way my mind works, and I wrote a song about it.
Right, so but that is part of what we're dealing with, to be in the conversation right here, right now.
In media, there's the gender stereotypes, there's the racial stereotypes, and people are saying, oh, we need to fight the stereotypes. But everyone's okay with the stereotypes about autism happening. And there obviously is a small group of people trying to fight those, but there's not as big of a realm of, oh, we need to fight the racial stereotypes, we need to fight the gender stereotypes, as there is for the rest.
That's the thing, though, is the mom and her opinion on this topic is supportive of those stereotypes. She's basically saying that the stereotypes are there for a reason, and if we lose sight of those stereotypes, then we're losing meaning in what autism is. It's misguided. It's misguided. She's protective of her daughter. She wants to make sure her daughter has a place in this earth, and it's already really hard for her to have that place. Whatever place she has here, the mom's had to fight for it. So she's scared that if the spectrum and the definition of it is expanding, and that we start to adjust our stereotypes of autism, then perhaps 𝗬𝗑's not going to get what little support she has in society, because it won't be seen as a disability anymore. Again, it's coming from that fear mentality, which is fine. That's part of the process. It's her own struggles, and it's a human thing. But I think it's important to just see it for what it is, and to see that the mom is closed-minded in this way, and it's not necessarily productive in the conversation.
Once again, I totally agree with everybody. But the reason why I stayed back is because I can't lie here.
Aiden, that's his name.
I really do feel like I have been represented quite well. But I think the reason for that is
You're the representation.
I am the stereotype. I'm a blonde boy. I was diagnosed as a child. I was in my own world. I was
self-aware.
Yeah, I was considered gifted with my piano skills and perfect pitch.
When are we going to talk about how the stereotype is shaped after predominantly white autistic individuals with higher support needs? Because that is the population that has more access to support because they come from families who are able to pay attention to them and afford that support. When are we going to talk about how a lot of autistic people of color are not diagnosed, not supported, because our society is built to not support people of color the same as it is for white people? Because of that, our stereotypes do not encompass people of color because we don't know how the autism shows up in people of color. When are we going to talk about how people of color either go their whole lives not diagnosed or they get diagnosed way later in life and their spectrum looks completely different from the stereotype that is shaped after white individuals? And likewise, just like how I'm calling out other autistic individuals for attacking that mom, I'm going to call out that mom right now. If she is going to support stereotyping autistic individuals and not wanting to support expanding what the spectrum looks like, that means providing a space for people of color on the spectrum to be a part of that conversation, then she cannot sit there and ridicule those ridiculers online for speaking up if she's the one who wants to silence things. You know what I'm saying? We all have to be willing to listen to each other, even if we don't agree. You can listen to someone and understand them, even if you don't agree. Who knew? Who knew? You don't have to just disagree and then not listen to the other person. Because, that doesn't make sense. If you disagree with them and you don't listen to them, then how do you know what you're disagreeing with? Anyways.
A child, a lot of people called me a prodigy as a child. So I fit that stereotype. Another reason why I stayed back is because I think we're headed in a better direction. For example, How to Dance in Ohio. There's another series I watched just recently. It was a British series.
Heartbreak High, the character I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, no. There are some great stuff out there. My personal favorite, Disney Pixar's Loop. I think you would really enjoy it because it features a non-speaking character and it's played by a non-speaking person.
Oh, yeah.
You should definitely check it out.
Do you think it's offensive when someone who's neurotypical plays a character that is autistic?
Yes.
Yes. That was one thing I was trying to bring up, especially where Veronica was bringing up about
extremely
the more
offensive
inclusive,
and not
basically inclusive
good.
appropriation. I do feel like it's so offensive with someone that's neurotypical to portray someone that's autistic. Like 𝗪cie did that with a little girl
It's dehumanizing.
who was
It's
not
making
on the
autism a
spectrum,
caricature.
and she had a lot of backlash for that. And I see what they're trying to do, but they don't think about why not someone that can understand it, especially for the fact this is something that's not temporary. This is permanent.
Something that's kind of important is that in the media, a lot we see characters with autism, their entire character development is either learning to cope with autism or learning to mask autism, and it's not often something where it's like yourself, where it's like your story is learning music, right, and becoming a teacher. And that's such a more wholesome story than a person who's basically learning to suppress themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the reason why I have such a pushback against The Good Doctor and Atypical is because I went to drama school, I've surrounded myself with industry professionals who are not autistic. I know the intent, and in my opinion, they're doing it for money. I'm sorry, it's selfish, it's greedy, and no matter, even if they think they're doing the right thing, because they're relying most of the time on stereotypes, they're continuing to push the narrative that we are not just one monolith. And for me, that really bothers me. And in no way am I shape or form trying to
and I totally
downplay.
agree with that too. I think it's better that people on the spectrum.
I just get angry.
That could be said for anything, though.
Yeah.
It's like I think when
I feel the same way about LGBTQ films with straight guys who try to pander and be all, clearly, they're playing gay characters to win an Oscar. I mean, I think of Saltburn. Yeah, gay for pay, yeah.
I think media as a whole is superficial 90% of the time. There's some deep movies, deep shows, things like that, but the reason why they only deal with how they deal with their autism or where they got their autism from and not something deeper like your story is because they don't tell those stories. They just tell you the quickest thing they could tell you.
That's why I was so honored to be on American Idol. I am very, very happy with how they portrayed me. They even included my meltdown in there as well. It was very raw, and they didn't skew it. I can truly say that, So that's another reason why I say I think we're headed in the right direction, because I'm firsthand lived example of that.
Last point.
And then you were talking about how, LGBTQ films or actors of different races, and there's not that much happening with actors without autism representing characters with autism. That's just because there's not enough movies being made about that. Like you saw Sia's music, and there was tons of backlash against that. But there hasn't been that much backlash in recent films because there just aren't enough films being
Which
made.
is ironic because Sia actually came out last year and said that she was diagnosed with autism, which is a whole other
Right
ballgame.
there. Right there. Right there. At what point is categorizing people and not letting them to just be them actually counterintuitive? Because who is to say 𝗂𝗶𝘁𝗵 isn't gay or bi? Who is to say that? Likewise, who is to say Sia wasn't autistic? At what point are we not allowing humans to continually grow and explore what their identity means? Because we don't need to establish that in its entirety immediately. It takes a lifetime to learn about yourself. You know what I'm saying? I only found out I was autistic in my latter 20s. Think about all those people that ridiculed Sia for taking advantage of autistic individuals and appropriating it and stuff like that with that music video, only for her to get diagnosed with autism herself years later. I feel like that's why it's so counterintuitive for people to just jump down other people's throats automatically and just critique everything about them and tell them that they did something wrong and they need to change. Because you just don't know where someone is at in their journey in discovering themselves and understanding themselves. You don't know all the aspects of them. You just don't know. And at some point you look stupid assuming. At the same time, you're the same person that would ridicule another person for making assumptions, even though you're the person making assumptions too.
That intrigues me. But anyway, I had to throw
A lot of
that out
writing
there.
prompts there. Let's move on to the next prompt. All right. It's better for autistic people to date with.
You know what? You know what? I might just pop a squat.
You hesitated. I'm curious if you want to start.
I hesitated because that's such a superficial thing to look. I mean, like it just and the basics.
I disagree and
like
agree.
I don't want to just be with somebody just because they're autistic, but you know, it's good to find commonality in someone, and I think autism is a huge part of my identity and how I see and how we see the world, and just like I personally don't look for. I mean, granted, I've never been in a relationship, and I think me being autistic and not trusting guys in particular is something that I struggle.
The benefits of dating another autistic person is you don't have to teach them about autism, but the thing is, there's not this inherent thing of like, if we're both autistic, we're just immediately going to click and understand each other. It's just like everyone has to learn about each other, period. But the thing about having autism is there's certain parts of the autistic experience and struggles that you have to teach someone if they're not autistic, that you don't necessarily have to do with someone else who lives with autism. So my partner isn't autistic. I have to teach him about what shutdowns are, what meltdowns are, you know, what my accommodations are, what my communication process is like in association to autism. If I were to date another autistic person, I don't necessarily have to tell them what a meltdown is and teach them that. They probably have had it themselves and deal with it themselves. It's a matter of I'm just teaching them what my meltdowns look like. And so it's up to every autistic person as to what they're able to put up with and what they want to put up with. Some autistic people just want to deal with the issues of getting to know someone and having them learn about you. That's already hard enough. And there's other autistic people out there who like to teach other people about themselves and about autism. And I think that there is actually benefits from that. It's a lot more work and not everyone's able to do it, which is fine. But I do think there's benefits from autistic individuals dating non-autistic people because it allows non-autistic people to learn in a more intimate and nuanced way what the spectrum means. And I think as society learns more about autism and their interpersonal relationships, it only benefits society as a whole because we're expanding our concept of what autism is and our understanding of what autism is. In turn, dispelling those autistic stereotypes that are harmful.
But I can see how it is better because it's easy just to, because that autistic person might be able to like see you, like at just even sitting here just talking about our experiences, like you can say something and I can see you in that moment and it feels good. But ultimately, I don't think it's the end all be all.
So Abby, you want to talk about dating David, who's on the spectrum?
David, my boyfriend, is also on the autism spectrum, and we like to go to like the Century City Mall independently sometimes.
And what's great about David that
He understands the way my mind works. He understands my autism, and we just went to the zoo.
So the mom's
yesterday.
trying to prompt her.
for her autism,
Which is just
dating
her
someone
trying to
within the
help
autism
Abby.
community is right. And David understands her autism. Just the other night, we had a big dinner in a restaurant, and there was a crying baby right next to our table. What did David do for you?
He covered my ears, and in some ways, that baby actually really liked me. When he was crying, he was a lot. You know who he reminded me of? Curious George, the little monkey. And his mother reminded me of the man with the yellow hat.
She's great with the analogies, right? But what was great is that when she started to have a meltdown and a real anxiety attack because that screaming baby, that auditory sound, they wouldn't change tables. We asked to change our table, the restaurant wouldn't do it. It's just one of those unfortunate scenes. Family was really nice. It was just unfortunate. David leaned over and covered her ears and let her experience that. And I'm not sure a typical person would get that or understand that or have patience for that. And that happens, by the way, a lot.
Feel uncomfortable having a neurotypical person date Abby?
Candidly speaking, I guess I kind of would.
I would agree with her.
Because the innocence.
Because Abby has higher
She needs
support
an aide
needs.
to help her, always. We're still learning life skills. I don't understand
So there
how
would be an
a typical
imbalance.
person might be able to have that level of patience. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I just think in general, and what I've witnessed between David and Abby is like literally makes me cry.
Yeah, because with a higher support needs individual, there's a sense of control that has to be there. And control is going to be neutral here. Like the mom has to have some sort of control over Abby in order to be her caretaker. That is just objective reality. And what the mom is trying to say here, I think, is that if a man has to have that same control over her, she doesn't know if she would trust that because there's an imbalance of their neuro capabilities. And so she feels more comfortable that someone that has the same capabilities as Abby is with her so that they both are on more equal grounds and don't have the ability to control her in a way that could be harmful, because that is definitely a possibility, is disabled people being taken advantage of and controlled by other people who are more capable than them and have more access to resources and power because they're more capable.
I've never been in a relationship either, and I 100% would love to date someone else on the spectrum. I definitely think that there would be a lot of beautiful connection there. However, there really is something beautiful about a neurotypical person who just gives a crap. I'm personally no less attracted to autistic people than I am to neurotypical people, but man, I'd be lying if I said I did not only want to date someone on the spectrum.
I actually do agree with y'all was saying earlier. Like, I do see where y'all coming from about having someone on the spectrum date with someone on the spectrum.
Great team.
It will bring less problems, but it just depends on the person, I guess, because
Austin, I love Austin. I could see why you're doing this. I could see why you say this.
I just said I'm pansexual, and unfortunately, some people who I had feelings for, I had to try and find many reasons not to have feelings for them, especially at work, because they are, because
Story of my life.
I don't, because I hate it because it's just weird and inappropriate for me. But anywho, and I just think people on the spectrum should be able to make a choice if it's safe to do so, because we are living in a garden of evil, and we do have unfortunate people that will manipulate those of us, whether we still have our innocence or not.
I don't think it's safe for Abby to make that decision herself.
I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
So I'm 16.
Oh, there you go.
You obviously should be aware that, sometimes people will prey on those who they think they can manipulate, even in neurotypical relationships. But at the same time, I don't think that anyone, kind of regardless of who they are, should close themselves off to someone solely based on like a group that they're a part of or a stereotype, right?
That
and
I agree with.
I think that we should treat everyone as individuals and look at as such, and so maybe we should be kind of open to whatever comes our way.
Exactly.
Let me put it this way. The autism label should not be the reason why a neurotypical person would not want to date someone on the spectrum. The autism themselves, you know, you see what I mean? It's hard to explain, you know, like the label can't get in the way. If someone is like, oh, by the way, I have autism, and then they just immediately walk away just because of that, you know, then I think that that's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah. I think dating is probably a struggle for many people,
And
whether
yes.
it be neurotypical or
No,
autistic.
yeah.
And that's why I have
universal
respect for you,
problem,
especially for the fact you're a single mom, you taking 2 kids, a full job. Like, I have total respect for you because my mom is in a similar boat. I completely have full respect for you, so I understand.
He's so validating. I love him.
How did you go about, I guess, setting up that blind date? Is there like a way for maybe autistic people to be able to date easier? Is
Well,
there
it's
such
interesting
systems?
because she was on Love on the Spectrum, and so that was like a random thing that came from Australia to the US. And I'll be honest with you, even saying yes to doing that show, she didn't really know what it was. I didn't really know what it was, but then I saw Australia season 1, and it made me nervous because they were driving cars, college grads, they were going to Europe by themselves, and I was like, well, we don't have that, and there's a big expressive language issue. So I think you want, pardon the term, Asperger's in love. Because these folks have a different skill set, and I didn't want her to be in over her head. She didn't care really one.
I mean, what's confusing about her to me is she keeps saying, pardon my term, and then still using the word Asperger's. So it shows that there's consciousness there, and she's still intentionally using Asperger's. I mean, I'm not necessarily offended, but I'm just like, why are you doing that? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you identify and understand that that's not the right term and it's even offensive to some people, then why continue to use it unless you're trying to be willfully stubborn about it, which I think is just like weird, you know? Like, at that point, just use the correct term.
Or the other. So obviously it was a great thing we did, but I will say that the team, once they came over, they were really kind about it, and they let her kind of be her and do her thing. And
Yeah,
so
that's
the
right.
rest
Because I couldn't focus and sit still. I needed
right.
I needed to be moving.
during the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You made it through with flying colors.
Thank you.
And flying colors means victoriously, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're doing it here now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Autism can be a strength.
I agree. Oh, God.
Had to think about that, huh?
The mom's like, could it be a
I don't
strength
wanna
if I
say
think it's only
know
a
people say it's
disability?
superpower. I don't necessarily agree that it's a superpower. One of the reasons why, like, I write about autism appreciation with my son, and I haven't really told the story of reason why. When my son was first showing signs of delay and we were getting him diagnosed, that's all I thought about. It was like, it's the worst thing in the world. Terrible things are gonna happen, terrible things are gonna happen. As I was worrying about it being the worst thing in the world, I had a heart attack, and it turns out I needed a quintuple bypass. So I had a quintuple bypass, I was 35. I had no idea, I had no health problems before that or anything. And I remember being in the hospital, and I didn't think about what he couldn't do.
I got chills.
I didn't think about my worries, I just wanted to see him. I wanted to get my son back. And since that day, I've tried to focus my entire life on positives, but especially when it comes to him, the positives that come with his autism. And the fact, as I said before, he's true, he's honest, he's genuine, his soul is pure, the things that he does are for a good reason. And a lot of the things that I think sometimes I'm guilty of as somebody who's, neurotypical, selfish tendencies sometimes, or conceit or arrogance, things like that. He doesn't have those things. And it's almost like the removal of those things are his strength.
I actually agree. Like I see your point, because I do think autism is a strength. As you said, being autistic, it's like you have, like, I guess in my meaning, double the innocence versus how you would be when you're neurotypical. Because when I was in high school, imagine all the crap I have to eavesdrop on, and I'm just like, yeah.
Social norms equals
people
loss of
now.
innocence? Is that
But it's
what
not
we're
all
saying?
of them anyways. But the whole point, though, is some of them do remind you the times where those innocence is almost so valuable, because, you only want to have them once, and sometimes, depending on what you do, you may
Social
get it
deficits
partly,
equals
and some
honesty
days you may
equals
get it, but not the same way like you used to.
innocence?
So, yes.
I'm a little on the fence about the pure thing. I was called pure a lot as a teenager. I'm not totally sure how I feel about that, but I totally understand what you're saying.
You could be
in every
honest
other
and
way.
not pure.
And for
Honest
me,
and not
it takes
innocent.
the form of, autism is my superpower. Autism is my strength. Autism is something I have. It's not something that I am. That's my relationship with it. And I will accommodate your relationships with your autism. Autism is not always a strength, though. Some of the most traumatic moments of my life have been sensory overloads, meltdowns in public.
Great team,
so
great
I think
team.
that would be kind of ridiculous to call that a strength. But at the same time,
Master Precise Liquid Eyeliner. No slip grip. Precision tip. High impact shades. Maybelline, New York.
The new 5T60 pull-ups are available and ready for even bigger playtime. Learn more at pullups.com.
autism is very much a strength in so many other ways.
For me, I ditto that. But I will say I am slightly different in the sense of like, I identify as an autistic person rather than a person with autism because it's not something I need to otherize. For me, I understand why other people would kind of, everyone
I just
has
say
their
I
right to
have
a preference.
autism.
In terms of it being a
I'm
strength.
an autistic person.
I see it as a strength because frankly, I don't know who I would be without it. Because for me, in terms of how to incorporate my autism to that, I use it as part of my arsenal. Not as like a crutch, but like just more as like I can do this because I have this mixture of my autism and my upbringing, and I kind of bring them two together because that's what I know.
You can't simply look at autism as a deficit as opposed to a strength, because that's basically saying part of who that person is a deficit. And that's not correct. And so it's better that we try and have this positive outlook on it instead of saying, hey, this person has a problem. It's, hey, this person is different. How can we help them or accept them?
But see, in Abby's case, there is a deficit. And that's the difference. So that's why the spectrum and the language is confusing. If you have to learn to talk, and you have to learn that the world is happening right here, because some people come in so isolated, just shut down, and I wish that the industry would change the language so that those that have overcome deficit are honored, and those that have just a difference are honored. Do you see why the language and the confusion and new diagnostic things, it's all sort of blurred lines until we get this clear, and it's to me, the biggest problem.
Hey, Abby, I want to ask you.
It's interesting that the mom chose to focus more on deficits in this conversation than the strengths. Again, she's coming from a defensive, protective place. You could still get accommodations even if the spectrum expands and our idea of autism expands. You could still understand that autistic people have a bunch of characteristics about them outside of those deficits and still accept that there's deficits there. Likewise, you could still accept that autism is a deficit and still have no accommodations being given or integrated. And that's what our reality has been, you know? Like, for much of the existence of humankind, the only autistic individuals getting diagnosed were the Abbies, you know, and still our accommodations for that population is not great. So the amount of accommodations that there are in society, or the lack thereof, isn't because of anything that has to do with whether or not we see it as a deficit or not, or whether the spectrum is expanding or not. It's just our governments and the people in power's inability to continually understand, learn about, and figure out how to integrate and accommodate autism and disabled people in general. And keeping ourselves and our society and researchers from learning more about a disability isn't going to help push those accommodations forward. We have to keep actually pursuing more and more research and information in order to figure out how we could begin to really apply these sort of accommodations.
Question: What do you think your strengths are?
My strengths are singing, swimming. I can see things before anyone else. I can remember things. I can hear things far away in the distance.
Yeah, no, it's very, very important that we all acknowledge the fact that everybody, whether we're on the spectrum or not, has strengths and weaknesses, things that make us unique. Just because the weaknesses or deficits, if you will, might seem a bit more outlandish, or might be things that an overwhelming majority of society does not struggle with, doesn't mean that unique struggle is any less valid.
To conclude it, I know you were recently on American Idol. We would love to hear you sing.
Oh, well, before I sing.
Oh, he's like, I'm gonna make a plug.
EP Regroup. I've worked with some absolutely incredible people, including my drummer, Logan Shepard. Shout out to you, man, who is also on the spectrum and is a touring drummer. Anything is possible. And you are the best that'll never be in my life, in my life.
Whoa, what about me?
All right, so that concludes today's video. I've talked long enough and gave all of my input. I think I opened up the floor for a lot of very interesting conversation and discourse. I would love to know what your guys' nuanced great team takes that you guys have. Leave them in the comment section down below. Don't be afraid to need to take some time to write out whatever takes that you guys have, because if it is truly nuanced and part of the gray team, it's probably not something you could type out within a few minutes. It's like something you probably have to think about and spend a few days to like really draft up. I want you guys to remain respectful in the comment section down below. It's okay for us to disagree on things, but I want you guys to come from a place where you will always at least commit to trying to understand another person, regardless of if you agree with them or not. And you don't have to make someone have your own beliefs. If I see any comments of someone who is only focused on telling someone why they're wrong, instead of just expressing what they believe, I am blocking you. I have no room for black and white. Here on this channel, we are great team. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys for tuning in on today's video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.